If your creative push has helped you, you can help the show by shopping on Amazon.com. All you have to do is head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right there, and you can shop how you normally would. A small percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping cover the costs of creating, hosting, and maintaining your creative push. And especially with the holidays coming up, you can make a big difference just by buying the things you were going to anyway. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, and thank you for thinking of the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 178.
Rather than resisting criticism or negative feedback from others, I sort of say, bring it on, because it's going to help me grow.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Lucy Hardie. Lucy is an artist from Melbourne, Australia, who specializes in fine pen and ink drawings. Her work is a light and dark combination of romanticism, fantasy, and natural phenomenon, offering the viewer a contemplation of life's infinite beauty and mystery. And Lucy, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I was wondering if we could start out maybe by talking about how your parents built a school on their farm and kind of how that influenced you and your style.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on your show.
You're welcome.
Yeah. To start with, my parents, so they built a Waldorf school on their farm. My dad was a biodynamic farmer, so that's a form of organic farming. And my mum went to a Waldorf school, so she was inspired to give that education to us. And so they built this very small primary school on their farm, and that's where I went. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Waldorf education.
I'm not. Could you explain it?
Basically, it's an alternative form of education. Creativity is really emphasized in all subjects. It's sort of got a hippie element to it, definitely.
I like it.
Yeah. So there was lots of running around barefoot and climbing trees and that kind of thing. But at the time, I wasn't really aware of that side of things. It was more looking back that I see that there was a sort of hippie element. So what I got out of it was that emphasis on being creative and developing the imagination. So watching TV wasn't encouraged. I didn't watch TV till I was about 9. I was just left to my own devices, with my siblings to be creative in so many different ways. And that was encouraged through school as well, school and home. So it was both. It was a combination of the two. Yeah, so creativity was always encouraged in the school and at home. I started really, really early drawing and painting, and it was just something we did every day.
Yeah, I think that's, we talk about on the show a lot how creativity is like this thing that I think everybody's kind of born with, and then it's just a matter of when you kind of lose it. If it's not fostered the way that your schooling was, I think that everybody could gain a lot from kind of fostering that idea of creativity and incorporating it into like everything you do. Because once you, at least in the States, like it's like once you get to like high school, you're supposed to kind of start thinking about what you want to do for a career for the rest of your life. And usually the creativity is the first thing to go, because, of course you can't make money being a creative person.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of going down a different path. So I love that idea, that mentality.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I also grew up with that story, which was, being an artist wasn't really an option. It wasn't even an option put on the table. Creativity was encouraged, but being an artist and doing that as a profession, that was a whole other idea. Mm-hmm. And then I went to a regular state high school after the Waldorf primary school, and that was a big shock for me. So suddenly I went from this sort of alternative atmosphere to a really conventional schooling system. I was really sporty at the time as well, so I kind of loved it as well, because sport was really encouraged in the high school where it wasn't in the primary school. So in high school, I was naturally good at art, and I'd come from this really great sort of really advanced art education in my primary years to going to high school, and went back to the basics, and art was considered a blood subject, and it just wasn't really valued.
Right.
Yeah, so I was definitely influenced by that as well.
Now, when did you kind of make that decision that you wanted to become an artist and to try to make it, your full-time gig?
So I made that decision after I had my first solo show at the age of 23. So I was a self-taught artist up until that time. I had my debut solo exhibition in Melbourne, and it sold out on opening night.
Oh, wow.
And that was really the most significant exhibition I'd had up until at that point. That was the most significant exhibition I had. It was the first time where my art was really exposed to a bigger audience beyond my family and friends. Yeah, and just to receive that validation and all the work sold, and to have everyone in my life, everyone that was important to me that was there, and all these strangers that I met, it was incredible. And after then, that's when I decided to take it seriously.
Yeah, that feeling of, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Would you say that you had kind of, I guess, like defined your style at that point? Because you have a very beautiful style. Would you say that it was locked in at that point, or has it kind of morphed over time?
It's definitely evolved over time. But so I was doing very colourful illustrative works back then, mm-hmm. More illustrative, more flat. But there was definitely the emphasis on detail, and a similar atmosphere in the work was still there. So even though the way that I express that has evolved, still the sort of central message was there. That was really just the beginning.
Yeah. So oftentimes you incorporate multiple subjects into one, mm-hmm. And kind of merge them together in, honestly, like a really breathtaking way. I'm thinking You Are Here and Mary and The Opening as examples of those. Mm-hmm. When you have those kinds of ideas, do you have that like kind of planned out beforehand, or is it kind of just spur of the moment, and as you're going, you're kind of developing the kind of theme?
I do both. So usually I have a central idea that I'm clear about when I start. But I always allow room for spontaneity and for new ideas to come through while I'm creating. So, yeah, usually it's just an initial sort of idea. It's not fully formed what I'm going to be saying through the work, but then it clarifies as I'm doing it.
Do you ever have, when you're kind of spontaneous as that's going along, do you ever have ones that you just kind of have to throw away, like it just doesn't kind of come together in the way that you imagined that it would?
Well, I spend a lot of time sketching and planning. So a lot of the times where things don't work happen in the sketching process. So when I get to a final piece, I'm pretty ready to complete it and for it to be a finished work that I show in the public. So all of that, changing my mind and that kind of thing, that happens in my planning process. And if I make any mistakes, people often ask me, with such detailed work, what if you make a mistake? And because the work's built up in so many fine layers, it's actually really hard to make a mistake, because the marks that I make are so small and they're built up. It takes so long to build up areas of detail that it's actually a lot harder. A lot harder than you think to make a mistake.
Well, that's pretty cool. That works out nicely. Yeah. So is that something that you found that, like, as you're going and you're almost noticing a mistake or a deviation coming along, do you sometimes just go with it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So that's where the spontaneity comes in. And, if I don't have a blueprint that's perfectly finished before I start, then I can go with those changes that come up, or those deviations from the initial plan,
sure.
And just make it work. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. It's always a process, and each piece I learn from and go, what would I do differently next time? And I see imperfections in all of them, of course, but that's all right. It's never going to be perfect.
Right. I think everybody always sees imperfections in what you do. And even if you don't see them right when you're finished, putting the final touches on a piece or a book or a song or whatever it is that you're going to do, years later, you will see those, as you kind of continue to develop and evolve. So it's just kind of getting used to that.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And I think artists are, or in my experience, the artists that I am friends with, they're a lot harder on their own work than the viewers. They hold themselves to such a high standard, but viewers don't necessarily hold the same standard for them. So
sure, because you're so intimate with your work, like
exactly.
you've gone along the process with it, so all the I don't want to say weak spots of it, but all the places where you struggled or where you had to make a decision that you weren't sure of. So, I think that a lot of people can struggle with that idea of being your own worst critic.
Yes,
and I think that can stop a lot of people from creating too, or sharing too, which is really a tough thing to get over.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever dealt with that or any other kinds of resistances when it comes to actually getting the work done?
Oh, of course, yeah. That's such a funny question. It's like, are you crazy? Of course I have.
So what are some of those?
Well, I'd say especially in the beginning when I was starting out, I experienced a lot of self-doubt and self-criticism. And, because at the time what I experienced was I knew I had potential. I knew where I could go, but that was just a knowing. It hadn't been actualized yet. So the work, and I was limited by the skills I had at the time. So what I was creating wasn't what I knew was possible to create. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah. So what I was creating, that's what others were seeing, and they didn't necessarily see what I knew that, I knew I could go further with it, but I wasn't yet skilled enough to bring that to life. So just experiencing the gap between where I was and where I was aiming for, and it seemed like such a big gap for me to traverse, I guess.
Right.
And that was really challenging. And I would see all these artists that I admired and seeing their work and just thinking, how did they do this? Oh my God, just feeling really confronted by the limits to my own skills. And that was the hardest thing. Yeah. And so how did I overcome that? Just by taking one step at a time, really, and putting in the time. And that's something that no one has told me, and that is, it doesn't just take 3 years at university or 5 years at university developing your skills. It's, it's 10 years. It's a lot of years. It's a lot of time to get where you want to go. At least it is for me. And of course, I'm still reaching for where I want to go, but it's just taken years to develop my skills.
Yeah, that gap is a lot bigger than people think. Even when you're kind of standing there before you kind of go on this artistic journey, this creative journey, to that gap can be huge to see the potential, like you said, to see where you want to be, and knowing all the work you have to put in.
Yes.
The crappy part is that a lot of times it's like double or triple that amount of work. So it really is kind of just putting your head down and going for it. Mm-hmm. Did you ever reach a point then where, not that you've like solved that problem, that you've completely, as you said, you still want to evolve, but is there a point where the gap doesn't seem as big and you're like, okay, I've at least made it far enough where I'm more comfortable, and that self-doubt can kind of start to wane?
Yeah. I experience a lot more confidence now. So I still experience the criticism and self-doubt, and, a bit of a perfectionist. So I'm always find it hard to just do the work and be imperfect, especially if I'm trying something new. So I find that challenging. But through the years of doing the work, I feel like, it's like going to the gym. It's now that I've been doing it for so many years, it's not such a challenge. It's just a habit now, and it's just something it's built into my life. It's something I just do. I don't need to think about it. And when people, in the beginning, when I was getting my work out there, I didn't have much of a strong identity as an artist. I wasn't didn't have the confidence in my abilities. I didn't have the, the feedback from the outside that helps build that confidence as well. So when other people gave me feedback on my work or, their opinions, I was really impacted by that a lot. So I was pulled in all these different directions, and just because I wasn't strong in myself as an artist, and that just took time to develop that. And now I experience a lot more strength and self-confidence. So other people's opinions, I can receive them and, find merit in them and change direction if I need to. But there's much more of empowerment involved. I can let things go if it doesn't work for me. And, I see it more as a challenge that I like to take on. It's kind of, rather than resisting criticism or negative feedback from others, I sort of say, bring it on, because it's going to help me grow. So, yeah, just a lot more confident in myself as an artist and what I have to offer through my work.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we talked about the gap and how, you have to put that time in, put those steps in to kind of narrow that gap, but also building up kind of resistance to that criticism or to your self-criticism. It's like each time you put something out there and realize that, oh, okay, like the world doesn't hate this, or there's a couple things that I could tweak or change or whatever. I'm not going to die by putting out putting myself into my work. It's like a brick that you put down, and each time you're just building this wall that can like help to protect you. And really it's even more than that. It's like almost like you're not even building a wall, you're building like a house around you, just like this wonderful body of work and developing in that way. I love it.
Exactly.
I was wondering, did you have a particular worst moment, like having to do with that kind of stuff where it wasn't quite as easy as kind of dealing with it?
I would just say generally when I was starting out for the first few years, this was after before my first solo and afterwards when I really decided to commit to it. Really, it was just mainly my own view of my own work and the limits of my own skills, and just knowing how much work I still needed to do to develop myself. That was really the hardest. So it wasn't really anybody from the outside. It was more my dealing with myself and getting better at putting the work in and facing just the challenge of just sitting down at the easel in a quiet room all by myself. There's no running away, all the self-doubt there and all the self-criticism, and just that urge to procrastinate or avoid that was really strong at the time. So it was just a matter of developing the habit of creating and facing all the doubt and criticism.
So is there a trick then to kind of face that on a daily basis? Because I know that this kind of thing happens like cyclically. It comes and goes. Like you can be super confident for a month and then, just have like 2 months where you're just like you said, procrastinating because you don't want to, face that blank canvas, that blank easel, or that blank Microsoft Word document, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So how do you put in that time then whenever you're feeling that doubt?
Well, because I've developed a habit and a discipline, that it's a lot easier now. And I just bring back that analogy of going to the gym. It's a habit now. It's part of my life. It's the focus of my life. So it's no longer something I need to introduce or sort of substantiate in my life. It already is the focus. A lot of it now, I just do it. So that sounds very simplistic, but.
Yeah, I think that it does seem like a simplistic thing to say, but it really is that simple, because I think the human brain is just an awesome kind of machine where if you do something, I think they say like 30 days, if you do it 30 days in a row, it becomes a habit. And it really isn't that tough after that to sit down and do it, or just to sit down and face those fears. That's why those like 30-day challenges that people do, and I like to promote them, because just doing that just gets you in that rhythm, that habit where you, like you said, it's like going to the gym and you got those muscles built after a month and you're good to go. Like you said, Bring it on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when I do experience any resistance, and that for me shows up as wanting to procrastinate or finding other jobs to do that are less important, sometimes for me, I view resistance as something that's always going to be there. I've never gotten rid of it. And so my take on it is, how can I be better at being with resistance? Because going to war with it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. My challenge mainly is spending so much time alone in the studio. That can be challenging for me when I want to go out and connect with people. And that's what's required to do the work. And it's both. It's like I'm at my best when I'm creating my work and I'm on my own. And that's when I have the greatest experience of joy. But I also experience, when I'm not in that flow, and it takes a while to get into that flow, I also resist spending time alone. So sometimes for me, it's just as simple as just acknowledging it to myself. Sometimes I'll call a friend, someone else, a close friend who's also doing something creative, and, we share our experiences with each other and just supporting each other, and I'll just go, oh shit, I don't want to spend all this time alone. I'm sick of this. I want to go out in the sun. I want to connect with people, and just expressing the frustration. And often a conversation with somebody else or just acknowledging it to myself is enough. And then when I've done that, then I sort of find myself in a place of choice again, where I can focus on the bigger reason why I'm doing it. Yeah, so for me, it's just acknowledging the resistance, whatever that might be. And then when I've done that, I just feel more freed up to go, okay, what's the focus here? Why am I doing this? What's the bigger vision? And then I find that motivating to keep going.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, it's this thing that you are going to live with. And once you've kind of been living with it for a few years, you realize it's never going to go away, no matter what point you get to in your career or your hobby. Yeah. And there's so much power in just talking about it. And selfishly, that's kind of why I started the podcast, because it's just so motivating to not only be able to just be honest about the things that hold you back, and they're really not that bad if you really think about them, like laziness, everybody deals with it, or self-doubt, everybody deals with it. And I think that's one of the motivating factors, is to either talk about it or to hear other people talking about it and realize that you are not alone, because there's so much power when it's in your head. It's so much more powerful than when it's out there in the open. You're just like, all right, you can go out of my head and sit next to me and watch me do this,
Absolutely. And do you know Tony Robbins?
Yeah.
Maybe everyone does in your country. I don't know.
Yeah. Awaken the Giant Within. I can't recommend that book enough.
Well, there's one quote that he had that relates to this, and he says, the degree of success in life is directly proportional to the amount of uncertainty that you can comfortably live with. So what I like about that is, rather than making the aim being comfortable, just acknowledge that it's always going to be this is the way I see it anyway, that pursuing any artistic path, it's always uncertain. You're constantly stepping into the unknown because you are the creator. You're not implementing someone else's job role. You are creating the job role, and you're continuing to do that every day. And so there's this uncertainty, and it's just about learning to be okay with that uncertainty and that uncomfortableness, rather than trying to get to a place of comfort, which I don't think anyone really gets to.
Right. Well, I think that you can reach levels of comfort, but I think if you are pretty comfortable with what you've been doing, and I think you can probably look back at your work and realize that it's just about the same as it was like when you started feeling comfortable about it, because you're not challenging yourself. And I really like that quote and that idea, just like you're saying about going to the gym. If you bench press 100 pounds like every day for a year, like it's going to be really easy to bench press 100 pounds at the end of the year, but you're not necessarily progressing. You're being pretty stagnant. So kind of taking each of those uncomfortable situations, things that make you uncomfortable, and treating it as like this thing that is going to give you success or joy, and then treating it as like a flu shot almost, and becoming like stronger to that level of uncomfortability, and then moving onwards and upwards to more uncomfortable things to continue to progress. It's a good way to kind of gauge your path.
Yes. Yeah.
So with all your work, with everything that you have going on, do you have a formula for balancing your time?
I don't really see it as balancing my time, because I've really made my art the focus. So for me, that's involved a lot of sacrifice. I haven't put energy into other things, maybe to the degree that people with a 9-to-5 job would. So in that way, it's a very dynamic way of spending my time. It's not very balanced at all. It's pretty focused.
I got you. No worries.
But to stay focused on that, eating well, meditating, exercising, that all helps me stay focused.
Yeah, it really is as important as just having a healthy lifestyle and having like a well-balanced kind of lifestyle and being like the best kind of human being you can be. It makes when it comes down to sitting down, doing the work, and just being in a good mindset, it makes that so much easier. Definitely.
Yeah. And having people around me who are also creating, and having those close relationships that I, with people that we can share experiences with each other. That's so helpful. That's really important to me.
Yeah. And you mentioned, calling your friend whenever you're feeling that self-doubt. What advice does she give to you, or what advice would you give to her whenever you're kind of dealing with that? Is it kind of like, oh, just, I feel you, or is it, no, shut up, stop being a baby?
Yeah, actually, the person I speak to the most is my brother. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and I usually just call him and say, do you mind if I just vent for a little bit? He's really great. He's a really great listener. He's very accepting. So I'll just say whatever's on my mind. And he usually just goes, oh, yeah, okay. Like, next,
Right.
It's just, we have this understanding where we just share the challenges with each other and we don't take them seriously. It's just, this is coming up right now. This is really challenging. And it's not about attaching ourselves to it or arguing with it. It's just, oh, that's the challenge. And then once it's expressed, we share it with each other, then suddenly there's room to focus on something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just through communicating the challenges, somehow it sort of liberates them. Well, that's my experience anyway.
Yeah, it's like free therapy.
Yeah. It helps to have someone to talk to who doesn't take those concerns seriously, because I don't. When I'm in the thick of it, I do. I believe all the stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's really helpful to have somebody to talk to who doesn't buy the bullshit, and that's why we have such a great thing going on when we share with each other those things, because he doesn't buy it. He knows why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's what he supports. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to have that kind of trusted ally that you can kind of battle forth together.
Yeah.
Did you have a best moment or a most triumphant creative moment?
I've had lots of triumphant creative moments, but
yay!
Yeah, lots. But let's say one of the most significant was my first solo show, because that really marked the beginning of pursuing art with more decisiveness, I guess. And yeah, that was just an incredible validation for, I sort of taking a bit of a risk as a self-taught artist, and just that it was received so well was just incredible. And I just remember thinking that night it was the best night of my life, because I was really trying things out, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I had no idea if it was going to sell or not. I had no experience. Yeah, it was just sort of the beginning of more awesomeness.
More awesome.
Yeah.
Would you have any advice then for somebody who maybe is thinking about doing their first show, or attempting to do their first show, or starting to build their body of work, themed around their first show? Advice for maybe before and for after that happens?
Well, first of all, I'll just say, just be aware that where you're at right now, if you're just starting out, it's going to take a lot of time to develop as an artist. Mm-hmm. So even if it doesn't go as well as you'd hoped or planned, or even if it does go really well, you're going to evolve so much. 3 years after, you could likely be creating completely different work at a whole new level. So the beginning is not necessarily indicative of where you could potentially end up, if that makes sense. So
it does, yeah.
Basically, just be kind to yourself and where you're at with your skills when you're starting out, and be patient with, putting in the time to get where you want to go. It just takes so much longer than anyone expects. That's been my experience anyway. So, is there
how do you know when you're ready then? Like, do you have like a feeling, or is it, at what point can you make that decision that yes, I'm going to do this? Because like you said, like you still had those doubts until it kind of, ended up being a complete success.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know then that you're, that fine line between you're too self-critical, or maybe you're not pushing yourself hard enough?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think then I was lucky because I was ignorant, I had
It's bliss.
Yeah. And so looking back on it, with everything that I've learned since, I just say, I was pretty naive. I didn't really know what I was doing, just with so many different aspects of putting a show on. But that was sort of went to my favor, because if I had that knowledge at the time, I might not have made that decision. But I think it was just timing. I just knew that was the next step. And, there were people in my life saying, it's time to have your show, have a solo, you've got enough work. Yeah. So it was more just that I was ready for that.
Yeah. Just dealing with that slight uncomfortable feeling. But if the people around you are kind of, pushing you or encouraging you or nudging you in that direction, maybe it's time to start figuring that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lucy, before we let you go, I was wondering if you had like a greatest inspiration or a favorite book or YouTube clip or anything else that you draw inspiration from?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of inspirations, but one person who I'm inspired by at the moment is Patti Smith. So I'm inspired by, basically, I'm inspired by any person in any field who wants to create something extraordinary and touch people's lives in whatever way that may be. So I draw inspiration from all kinds of people, but Patti Smith is someone who I'm really inspired by. Her book, Just Kids, is one of my favourite books, and it talks about her relationship with the photographer Robert Mapplethorpe, and then growing up as young artists in New York City in the early 70s. And just all the people she met at the time, people who went on to become, famous musicians and writers and artists, like Salvador Dali and Jimi Hendrix and all these people that were around there at the time. And yeah, and just her voice, just her as a person, to me embodies that artistic spirit, just listening to her words, reading her words sort of transports me and gives me an experience of beauty, and that's something that I aspire to give to others through my work. So she's someone I find really inspiring. And there's a YouTube interview with her. It's called Patti Smith Interview Advice to the Young. Mm-hmm. And so she's being interviewed and she gives advice to young artists. And I think it applies to anyone, any creative person, really.
Yeah, I think it is important to find inspiration from, even if you're an artist, from musicians or photographers or writers, or, we're all kind of in this kind of creative battleground together. We all deal with the same kinds of things. That's why I like to have a lot of different variety of people on the show, because we are all dealing with this together. But the things that you draw inspiration from, even if you're an artist and it's music, like I was saying, to try to find the way to put that into your work will, I think, definitely elevate your work as well.
Definitely.
And we'll have all that linked up, all those resources at yourcreativepush.com/Lucy Hardie. And Lucy, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best words of advice and really push them to pursue their creative passions.
Sure. So firstly, what I would say to anyone starting out, whether you're young or, you're starting out later in life, is just to give yourself time to develop your skills. I've heard this from more than a few artists, and that's, it takes 10 years to receive any kind of recognition, significant recognition. I've heard that from lots of different artists, and that's been my experience. This idea of overnight success, it's usually preceded by many years of hard work. So that's the first piece of advice I'll give, is just to give yourself time and be patient, getting to where you want to go. Yeah, my other main tip would be to find a big enough reason to do what you're setting out to do. It's got to be a big enough why behind what you're doing, so that when you face that resistance and those challenges, that why will be compelling and inspiring enough to continue to move forward past the resistance. Especially in fine arts. At art school, you're really encouraged to be unique and find your unique voice and don't worry about what other people think. You know, it's kind of uncool to even think what's the audience going to think of my work. You know, it's about being innovative and unique. But I see art as any other service, and that is that you are going to be connecting with an audience. You're delivering something to others, and it needs to be of value. You need to be providing value to others. And that doesn't mean you compromise your artistic voice, but I'm just saying to find a big enough reason that honors the passion that you have, what you want to do, and that also inspires others some way, something that you're giving to others through your work. And that's where, for me anyway, in my experience, that's where the joy is, and that's where the fulfillment and sense of purpose comes from. I believe that that's what sustains me in moving forward, is knowing that I'm doing this not just for myself, but I'm doing this because I want to create an experience for other people that lights them up. And so that's what I would encourage other artists to do.
Yeah, beautiful. Because it is a communication. Art is a communication with, you know, yourself and also with others, with the world. And I really like what you said about, you know, that idea of 10 years to really, as you kind of set out on this journey of closing that gap we were talking about, just know that it is going to take a lot longer than you think, and to really not let it discourage you when, you know, 4 or 5 years in and you're not seeing too much progress, to just keep grinding, keep pushing. And the way to do that is to make sure you know what the answer to the big why, you know, that big question of why are you doing it, to pull you through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just perfect advice.
Thank you.
Lucy, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Thank you so much. It's been heaps of fun. Thank you.
Of course. And you can find Lucy on her website, which is lucyhardie.com. That's LucyHardie.com. And on Instagram and Facebook, she is Lucy Hardie Art. And again, you can find everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/Lucy Hardie. Lucy, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Oh, such a powerful final push there. Like a trifecta almost. You know, number one, take your time to develop your skills. It's going to take way longer than you think it will. Sorry, that's just the reality of it. It's going to take time. And number two, to find a big enough why, so that you can keep going when resistance gets tough, because it does get tough, and you need to have that reason, that thing that brings you fulfillment with your creative passion. You need that why to keep you going. And thirdly, to understand and honor that relationship that you have with your viewer, with your audience, because you are, of course, doing this for yourself, but you need to keep your audience in mind, especially as you progress. And this is with any art form: painting, drawing, writing, making music, podcasting, especially podcasting, actually, because as you develop your audience, they become a part of you. They latch on for the ride, and you need to make sure that you are understanding the communication that you have established with them as they continue the journey with you. And, you know, the other point I wanted to make was that we talk about admitting things out loud a lot on this podcast, and it's something that I'm a huge proponent of, you know, just saying your struggles or what you want to accomplish out loud to the universe, and then perhaps admitting it to your friends, your family, and then finally admitting it to or expressing it to your audience. And it sounds very simplistic, but as Lucy was saying in this interview as well, sometimes it is that simple, just saying it out loud to take the power away from it, or even writing it down or venting to a friend. It's like a fish swimming around in your head, and if you can pull it out of your head, you know, pull it out of its like a fishbowl that is your head, your brain, it loses a lot of its life, and it just kind of flops around there. And the tricky part, like Lucy said, is that it never goes away fully. It always gains power, or a new fish spawns in its place. But sometimes it really is as easy as just plucking it out of your system, just getting it out. into the open to see that it really isn't as bad and as mean as it looks like in the fishbowl. You know, the fishbowl is sometimes this like big magnifying glass that makes it look like this vicious piranha swimming around in there. But once it's kind of flopping around, you can kind of see this tiny little guppy, you know, this lifeless little piece of shit. And it's not as big of a deal. So I challenge you to, if you have these things that are holding you back, that are compelling you to listen to this podcast, to try to, you know, motivate you, and you're still struggling, find that trusted friend. And it can be me too. You can please email me, youngman@yourcreativepush.com. I would love to talk to you about your struggles, man to man, man to woman. We are all in this together. And if that conversation could help you, if you could vent to me in an email, I would love to receive that and try to help you in that way, because sometimes it is that easy if you don't have that kind of trusted friend. Or as I said, just admitting it to yourself, just saying it out loud or writing it down, just expressing to the universe the things that you are frustrated with, the things that are holding you back, can be extremely empowering because you can get them out of your head. I think that is the most important message of not only this interview, but this podcast. So please try to get past that. But that is all I've got for you. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. And we will be here for you on Thursday. If you need the push again, please go get some amazing work done. Get past those stupid, idiotic things that are in your brain because they don't matter. Get them out of there. Let them flop around next to you as you get your work done. And we will see you on Thursday if you need the push again. I love you, and we'll see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.